Hey everyone, happy to announce a major patch on the Dynamic Cold War campaign server. This patch is called The Cost of War, and many of the new mechanics and changes we have made follow this theme. We had originally said when we made the server public that we would require 3 major patches to consider ourselves finished and at version 1. We are going to adjust this and say we will need 4. The helicopter patch is being broken up into 2 major parts. This is part 1. If this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay, so if you're into that, please subscribe. Before we go into introducing the mechanics, I would like to say a word of thanks to 2 groups of people. One is the server staff for their incredible work in making everything possible. I am not technically savvy and have not written a single line of code for the server. The fact that these developers have been able to turn a dream into a reality has been amazing, and relatively speaking, the server is pretty bug-free because of how meticulous they are. I would also like to thank our Patreon supporters who have been helping us to absorb the cost of the Microsoft API, along with the server box. Without them, then I'm not sure how we would have been able to manage the cost of everything. So I really do thank everyone who's supporting financially. Now let's talk about the patch. The dynamic campaign feels real, and people are starting to get invested. With that said, some tactics like suicide bombing have sprung up, and this is reflective of the competitive nature of the server, as well as us not being done with all the mechanics. This now changes because we want to introduce this question to everyone as they fly and make decisions. Is it worth it? Should you dump all your altitude to go for the shot, or should you just extend and run away? Should you take an easy approach on the enemy ground position and risk getting hit by flak? Before, the answer was always yes, you should just do it, because it didn't matter if you died or not, but now it will. Every single airframe and helicopter on the server now has an airframe cost, and they are weighted differently to reflect the capabilities of each aircraft. As planes and helicopters are shot down, they begin to tally up. The campaign server is going to constantly compare the losses from both sides. It's just not the total losses, but the losses of each airframe type in order to get to a weighted total. The side that has the most losses will take a punishment, and that punishment is more severe depending on the variance in the losses. The punishment will increase the threshold that is required to move the front line. So what does this mean? Here's a hypothetical example. Right now, a 5% variance is required by one side to push the line. If one team is being suicidal and constantly suiciding into targets and never RTBing, the move threshold for them will increase from 5% and may go as high as 10% or even higher. Meanwhile, if the other side is being efficient with their flights and generally RTBing, their threshold will remain at 5%. In short, this mechanic promotes good behavior of trying to fly like your life means something and is incentivizing the need to RTB. This also ensures that the server does not devolve into airquake. You will still have to bomb ground targets in order to move the map. If a side only flies fighters, they will never move their front line. Aircraft or helicopters that come out of an airbase, road base, or FARP that do not RTB to any one of these locations are considered loss and will negatively impact their side. You will get a confirmation message when your takeoff has been confirmed, as well as a landing confirmation. The landing confirmation is generous and is set to about a 4-kilometer radius. You do not need to taxi all the way to the spawn area, just landing at the base is sufficient. As we do not have stats on the server, the maximum range of what the frontline move threshold will be is still to be determined, but we have coded this in a way where we can change the multiplier so it can be changed quickly if we find that this becomes too punishing or not punishing enough. Now that we introduced the concept of airframe cost, we can transition over to helicopters. As aircraft are being shot down and pilots bailing out, they can now be saved via CSAR. CSAR will be vital because saving a shutdown pilot restores 0.5 airframe cost to your side. This means that for an F5, for example, which has a base airframe cost of 1, the loss of this airframe is halved by saving the pilot. If a side is taking several losses, helicopter pilots can help mitigate that by saving shutdown pilots. If one side does not do this, and the other side is actively saving pilots, then you can get an idea of how this will skew the numbers. The move threshold for the side that's ignoring their down pilots is going to have a heavy penalty. This also gives an incentive for pilots who are damaged or can't make it back to base to have them try to at least fight their way back to friendly lines so they can make it easier for their pilot to be recovered by their friendly helicopters. All helicopters can do CSAR, but they are limited based on how many seats their helicopter has. Some helicopters can take more, while others take less. Helicopters use their radio beacons, and they are automatically pointed toward the nearest friendly downed pilot. When they close in on a downed pilot, a flare will be shot up, and as they move closer, eventually a smoke will pop. The downed pilot only has one flare and one smoke, so if you do not save him, that means that pilot may never be found again. Pilots that are saved use up one seat on the chopper, and they are not considered saved until they are RTB'd to a FARP. We are also allowing the ability to capture and save enemy pilots. Downed pilots will pop their one smoke and flare when the first helicopter gets close enough to them. This adds an element to the game where you may stumble across an enemy downed pilot. You have the option to kill the enemy pilot or to rescue him. Rescuing the enemy pilot gives a humanitarian bonus of 0.5 airframe costs to your side. Please note that we aren't sure the performance hit of the smoke and how it'll impact the server. If we find that it is lagging things, we have already prepared backup code where the pilots will only fire flares instead of smoke. The last major part of this patch is around how helicopters can do damage to the enemy front line without having to shoot. When helicopters spawn, they will be able to load an infantry squad, which takes up 4 seats on the helicopter. If helicopters are able to transport enemy infantry into an enemy sector, then the infantry will secure the area in 1 minute and then go on a mission to kill enemy frontline units. This means that after 1 minute of dropping off infantry in an enemy sector, the infantry despawn, and as it despawns, it kills a random enemy unit in that sector. This is done due to performance reasons, as having infantry running around will lag things. How much damage these infantry units do can be tweaked, and we will find the right balance as we see this go live. Combined together, this gives helicopters active things to do that do not require shooting. You will be able to actively help your side by dropping off troops, saving your downed pilots, and it will not be entirely scripted because you can stumble onto enemy pilots and their smoke or flares will be visible to all the other helicopters in the area. So this will create points of interest for helicopters to clash against each other. And again, if you ignore flares or smokes, the pilots may never be recovered. So it really gives you a moment of pause to think, are you going to continue on your mission, or are you going to stop what you're doing and save those people? We plan to do more with helicopters, and that will come in the second part of the helicopter patch. This will require major code overhaul and maintenance on the core frontline mechanics. So it's something that's not super sexy, but it is required for us to do more advanced mechanics in the future. So just know that we're going to be very busy overhauling a lot of things in the near future. We hope that you enjoy this patch, and I would like to remind everyone that how strong these individual mechanics are can be tweaked fairly easily, so please let us know if you're thinking something is too weak or too strong. This channel acts as a mouthpiece for the server in order to reach a broad audience to make sure that the server is full. So if you would like to help, please hit like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about the patch in the comments below, and thank you.